The high-end restaurant was a place where silence was an art form, and the murmurs of conversation blended seamlessly with the soft clink of fine china. It was a haven for the city's elite, a sanctuary where everyone seemed to know their place, and the waitstaff moved like shadows, invisible to the discerning eye. Jason Statham had arrived at the restaurant that evening for a quiet dinner, seeking an escape from his hectic schedule. Dressed in a simple black jacket and dark jeans, he barely looked out of place in this world of luxurious over-the-top opulence. Few recognized him at first. He was dressed casually, almost inconspicuously, a far cry from his usual action star persona. But those who did could sense something different about him. There was an energy about him, a quiet confidence, that made people glance twice. Jason was seated at a corner table, a spot that offered privacy but still allowed him to observe the ebb and flow of the restaurant. He hadn't come to be noticed, but the moment he walked in, there was a change in the air. It was subtle, but it was there. The usual noise died down, the staff straightened a little. No one dared to approach him just yet, and Jason didn't mind. He wasn't here to talk. He was here to eat, to think, and to escape for a few hours. It wasn't long before a young waiter approached. His name was Matt, and he had been working here for a few months. He was eager to make a name for himself, eager to prove he was capable, and eager to rise in the ranks. The restaurant was known for its exclusivity and perfection, and Matt, having only recently joined, was still learning the ropes of handling high-profile guests. But there was something about him, an arrogance, that made him overstep his boundaries. He thought the world was his, and the people inside the restaurant were just actors in his performance. Matt approached Jason's table, holding the menu in one hand, his notepad in the other. He was confident, almost too confident. "Good evening, sir," he began, his voice polite but a bit too rehearsed. "What can I get you tonight?" Jason looked up at him, his expression unreadable. There was a slight nod, the kind of nod someone gives when they're trying to convey that they don't want to be bothered. But Matt didn't pick up on it. Instead, he launched into his spiel. "I recommend the truffle risotto, it's our most popular dish. Or perhaps the seared scallops. Very light, very refined." Jason's eyes flickered to Matt's face, but he didn't say anything. He wasn't in the mood for small talk, not tonight. He just wanted the food to be brought to him, and he wanted to be left alone. But Matt wasn't having it. His ego was too big, and his need for validation was stronger than his instincts. He leaned a little closer, his voice growing a tad more condescending. "You know, most people who come here don't quite understand what they're ordering. They just want to look like they know what they're doing. But I can tell you're someone who appreciates fine dining." He paused, waiting for Jason to respond, but Jason only stared at him, an unreadable expression in his eyes. "I don't need to impress you," Jason finally said, his voice calm but firm, like someone who had been through much worse than a smug waiter. For a moment, Matt didn't understand. He leaned in a bit, clearly wanting to prove himself. "Sir, if you want the full experience, I can guide you through the menu, explain the origin of each ingredient, the subtle differences between each wine. I'm sure you'll enjoy it much more." Jason was quiet for a long beat. Then, without looking up from the menu, he responded, "I just want my meal, son." There was something in Jason's tone, a quiet finality, but Matt, still not realizing who he was speaking to, shrugged it off. "All right, whatever you say," Matt replied dismissively, turning to walk away. Jason's gaze followed him for a moment, and something in that look, something unspoken, seemed to freeze the air around them. But Matt, still riding high on his own arrogance, took the next few steps too far. He began to mutter under his breath, just loud enough for Jason to hear. "Another one of these too cool for school types, huh? Just sit there and expect to be treated like royalty. No gratitude, no respect for the effort we put into our work." He scoffed. "I'll bet he doesn't even know what good food is." Jason's brow furrowed. He didn't rise to anger, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that suggested this wasn't over. Matt moved on, unaware of the storm he had just stirred. But Jason's gaze never wavered. He watched as Matt engaged with other customers, his loud voice boisterous, trying to make an impression. But all the while, Jason sat there, thinking. When the food arrived, it was as expected, expertly prepared, as it always was. But Jason could barely taste it. The tension had built in his mind, making every bite feel hollow. The feeling of being dismissed, insulted, weighed heavier on him than the food ever could. It was a matter of respect. And this young waiter had crossed a line. Jason decided it was time to address the situation, but not with the immediate confrontation Matt expected. He rose from his seat, approached the manager, and asked for the owner. The manager, who had seen Jason's face a few times before but hadn't put it together, looked surprised. "Sir, if you would like to speak to Mr. Hayes, he's—" "I am Mr. Hayes," Jason interrupted. The manager's face turned pale. "Of course, Mr. Hayes. I'll take care of everything immediately. Please, follow me." Jason nodded, but instead of following the manager, he turned toward the back of the restaurant, toward the staff area. He wasn't here to make a scene. He just wanted to settle in his way. Matt was in the kitchen, bragging loudly about his excellent service, when Jason walked in. There was a brief silence, the kind that fills a room when someone enters with undeniable presence. Matt turned, seeing the man who had been seated in the corner all night, now standing in front of him, calm but with an intensity that demanded attention. "You think you're better than everyone here?" Jason asked quietly. Matt's face drained of color as recognition slowly dawned. I didn't. I'm the owner," Jason cut him off, his voice steady. "And you just insulted me." Matt stammered, his mind racing. The thought of losing his job, of embarrassing himself in front of the entire staff, made his legs feel weak. I didn't mean it. It's just... Jason raised a hand to stop him. "You'll finish your shift. But don't forget, respect is earned. You might want to learn that before you try to act like you know everything about this place, or anything else." Matt didn't know what to say. He was standing in front of the owner of the very place he had disrespected, and there was no way out. Jason turned and walked away, leaving Matt in that moment of crushing realization. The silence was deafening, as if the world had paused, waiting for him to figure out how to fix what had been broken. Jason left the restaurant that night with no more words spoken. He'd said what needed to be said, and the message had landed. As the evening went on, Matt could only reflect on his mistake. He had thought the world revolved around him. But he'd learned the hardest way possible: arrogance is a dangerous game, especially when you don't even know who you're dealing with. And tonight, he had underestimated a man who was far more than just a customer. He was someone who owned the room, even when he wasn't looking for attention. And for Matt, that lesson would stay with him forever.